Hello and welcome everyone to this session that has the headline Bend Not Break, Preparing Our Cities to Respond to Emergencies and Disasters. Before we start up this, I will give you some kind of technical information, how we're going to run this session. I will give a very short introduction very soon, and then I will hand over to the panel here that will each one give a short presentation. And hopefully we will have quite a lot of time at the end of the session to get you all involved. And please don't be shy. I can easily assume that the experience and knowledge that are gathered here in the audience is far beyond what we have here on the panel. So I hope we will have a good discussions at the end. Here at this Smart City Expo World Congress, we are using an application that enables us to put forward our question as long as the presentations is going on. So I would strongly recommend to use your mobile phones, your smartphones, use the application and find how you can go forward with your question. And you can submit your questions anytime during the presentations, and you can also see what kind of questions other people are submitting, and you can even vote on these questions to make them put them higher on the list for later discussions. So I hope you will find that out easily. It's supposed to be self-instructing. See if I can make this work. Great. Bend not break means to me very much urban resilience, that cities will become more resilient. And resilience is, in Scandinavian language, where I'm from, Sweden, a very difficult word. So we made a translation, or we made a definition of this. And urban resilience is the ability to maintain and renew functionality under pressure, regardless whether these pressures are chronic or sudden and shocking. And the word functionality here really opens up a bit. There is a lot of stakeholders in cities and in regions that is carrying on the responsibility of being functional. That means, of course, the local government, blue light services, but also other stakeholders. We are talking about the private sector, who is carrying a lot of responsibility of having a city that is functioning. And how do we get them involved during emergencies, during crisis, in our plans and in our preparations? Besides that, there is, of course, others. There are citizens. Today, we more often see how these non-organized becoming self-organized. In countries, an organization, as an example, called Missing People, that are helping when people are lost in the forest or in the wilderness, or if people are lost due to crimes, or if people are lost because they are ill, have dementia, etc., and can't find their way homes. So, bend and not break. How can cities better prepare to cope and boost resilience for us citizens? I will hand over to our first speaker. Please, take a stand.
Hello. Can you hear me? Yes. Hello, my name is Esteban León. I'm working for UN Habitat. I'm heading the City Resilience Profiling Program of UN Habitat. Let me give you a bit of an introduction of what UN Habitat is about. This is a UN organization. It's the organization mandated to work with human settlements, with cities. It has a large, as you can see, it has a large mandate, but it's a small organization. It's been a kind of process for us to start working in this program, the City Resilience Profiling Program. And I'm happy to be here presenting more or less the concepts and the ideas of this program. This evolution was a mix of different things. I mean, the traditional disaster risk reduction that most of the actors have been working on obviously is not enough in systems of cities. I mean, cities are complex contexts, and for us, this is one of the main issues. I mean, the process of UN Habitat was we went from the humanitarian part, from the risk reduction to humanitarian settings, trying to always, recover and rebuild from crisis situations and build back better and safer. But then we realized that we can start progressing and advancing in this by making resilient, by making city to all this kind of phenomena. I think, well, as a good, I can speak for hours, so please let me know when I'm speaking too much. So the idea, the change in resilient cities is quite interesting. I always use this analogy. I always mention that a city is like a human body. You can analyze the diseases. You can analyze, yellow fever, malaria. You can research on that. But reality is that a body which is healthy is a body that most likely will resist any kind of disease. And the same applies to cities. A city that is healthy, that the systems are healthy, most likely will recover faster and better from any kind of shock or stress, any kind of crisis. So that's the main principle of urban resilience for us. The principle is that we analyze the city as a system. We believe that it's an integral, it's a holistic way of doing it. And then we start injecting the different impacts or shocks that a city, or hazards that the city can have. And then we see how the city reacts, how the systems react. So the whole program provides this kind of framework in which we provide a diagnosis of the city. We analyze the city, we provide a diagnosis of the city, and we provide some recommendations for action. So what are the main issues that a city major should address in order to build resilience in their cities? So that's the main principle. The program is a multi-stakeholder, multi-hazard. We believe that all people living in a city, inhabitants of a city, are actors that should be consulted and should be part of this process. And of course, the private sector is one of the most important elements here. I must say it's a new approach of building resilience in cities that has not been taken until now. We were just discussing about how the system, the international system, was responding to some crisis situations, and until now, you can see that the response is very sectoral. You have a team that responds on shelter issues. You have a team that responds on food, on water, and different sectors. But we are not very used to handle or to manage this kind of crisis situations in cities because are complex. So complex, not complicated, are complex. So the idea of this program is precisely that, to have a kind of baseline information for us to be able to not only respond, but also to recover and to rebuild the cities in a proper way after a crisis situation. The program also addresses 4 large agreements, international agreements that are very important for all of us to know. One is the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 11, which is exactly safer and sustainable cities, safer, resilient and sustainable cities. We also address the new urban agenda, which is what Habitat 3 conference launched last year in Quito. It goes in line with that. It also goes in line with the Paris Agreement, which is on climate change issues, and also with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. These are commitments that countries have made. And in order to deliver these commitments, and until now, we had no means of verifying or having any kind of baseline data and information that can give us an idea of how you improve or not in a city. So that was the other premise that we had. We have to provide local authorities, national authorities, and different stakeholders with tools and methodologies that can serve for them to deliver what they have to deliver, and also to respond to crisis situations that are more and more often nowadays. The other thing that it's, I think, important to say is we all know and by now that the world is urbanizing. I mean, we are more and more urban, and we think that for 2050, 75% of the world's population will be in cities. So therefore, it makes sense to start preparing for that. The big problem of this migration, really rapid migration, is that it doesn't go hand by hand with the capacity of absorbing this population. So you can see cities are, you know, unplanned or overwhelmed with new people coming, and the idea is that we suppose and we should be supporting this engagement, and we should use this new population as assets and not as, you know, liabilities. I mean, urbanization is a good thing. It's a good thing as long as you take measures and you do something about it. If you have an unplanned urbanization, you will have the big problem of having to deal with these crisis situations, because one thing is for sure, and I've been in many disasters in my life, most of the affected population are population that are living in precarious situations, in slums, in favelas, that they have no resources, they are living are risky, are vulnerable, and this is basically because they settle, and there is not a plan for this type of settlements. So I don't know, I have, I think, 34 seconds. My last 30 seconds then, I will use it to mention that this program has had good support of the Ayuntamiento of Barcelona. Here I have some people from the Ayuntamiento of Barcelona. It was born here basically in Barcelona, with the municipality, with the Ayuntamiento of Barcelona, and with some staff that they seconded us, and they also opened the doors for us to start collecting some data and information. The program is also implementing now in many cities. One of our main donor is the EC, the European Commission, DEFCO. We also have donors from private sector. We have insurance companies, and we have a consortium of different private sector people. We also receive funds from other cities and cities that want to implement the program. They are paying themselves for us to support them. So I must say it became a very successful program, and I think that it's our task to think about that. Now I'm off, I think, for time. Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. And now it's Stephen Kost from Hexagon. Please.
Yeah, let's see if we got slides. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Kost. I'm the president of Hexagon Safety and Infrastructure. For those of you that may not be familiar with Hexagon, Hexagon is a multinational information technology provider spanning industries from geospatial, geosystems, mining, public safety, and even in oil and gas. Myself, I run the Safety and Infrastructure Division, and I live in Huntsville, Alabama. It is the real Sweet Home Alabama. So for those of you, I'm certainly proud to hail from somewhere that a song may be more well-known than the state. But all that being said, the southeastern portion of the United States is no stranger to natural disasters. Just in the last year, we've had 3 hurricanes hit in the southern part of the United States, creating over $3 billion worth of damage. And so in a city, whether you have natural disasters or acts of terror, all of the infrastructure and all the things in the city, all of the police, the fire, the utilities, all the urbanization, it comes under more and more stress. And as we see every single day, these things become more and more critical. As we think about the smart city concept, I think that it's fair from at least my perspective to believe that a safe city is really a precursor of being a smart city. And it's more than just keeping your citizens safe. It's really about the rest of the infrastructure and making people comfortable to come visit your city and making people comfortable to invest and expand your city. Let's take an example of one city in the U.S. This is a backdrop of San Francisco. Several months ago, San Francisco had a small fire in a substation, and it knocked out power to a pretty sizable portion of the city. The city, unfortunately, doesn't have a really solid overarching technology, and so all of the silos in the city started reacting. And the impact was far greater than just the utilities. We had interruptions with traffic, with school, looting. And so at the end of the day, the reliability of the utility really was very minor compared to what the resiliency of the city ultimately had to be. And so where the utility impact wound up being only 0.1% of the overall cost of what seemed to be a relatively minor power outage. And so what does this mean, and what do cities need to do? Well, some of the limitations are in many developed cities, believe it or not, there's not a comprehensive view of risk. They have no single responsible authority to really deploy and make those decisions. And then the funding is done, be it utilities through funding and taxes, or be it allocation through budgets to police, fire, and ambulance and other. So it really creates a lot of limitations on some of these cities. As Esteban talked about, we have 50% of the people living in cities today. That's going to grow to 70% or 75% by 2050. And that's only going to create extended stress on our environment. Each and every day we wake up to a new form of disaster, be it fires in California, be it people driving cars into crowds, people shooting out of high-rises into concerts. Something happens every day that's something we haven't prepared for. And so it continues to be a challenge. But the citizens of the world don't give private industry or municipalities a break. They expect 85% of the same or higher quality of information out of the municipalities and out of what the city is providing as they do private industry. The second thing that we talk about is the silo effect. And you have, this is a public safety example, but in police, fire, and ambulance, many times you have each functioning individual on individual budgets. And it really comes from a legacy that didn't face the challenges that we have today. The funding doesn't go across. Many times there are unions that have been in place for years, and so the ability to really move forward really means that we have to somehow find a way to transcend these silos and really create an opportunity and create funding funding and authority at a level above each of these entities. And so what does that really mean? That means that first of all, each of the silos have to be best in class, and they really have to improve their individual operations. And then the cooperation between the two. Many times we have rivalries between these in some cities, and they need to really break those barriers down, begin to talk and collaborate, and then ultimately share the funding. I have two examples of organizations that have done a really fantastic job. The first one is the LAFIS, L-A-F-I-S Association in Eastern Switzerland. And these guys got 30 organizations together and brought together and made one central command. They funded it, they coordinated it together, and ultimately have created really a world-class setting in a Western Europe setting. And so recently at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, this was in place and things went off seamlessly. All the organizations worked well together. Today, 30% of everybody in Switzerland is covered under this one organization, certainly a best in class. We talked about expanded engagement, and that second tier, and Esteban talked about it as well, is the citizen app phase and how to bring social media forward to really give that complete picture of situational awareness. If you think back to all of the information in the Las Vegas shooting, much of that information and actually the identification of where it came from citizens on the ground responding and communicating and being aware of which way to run and which way to find safety. The last example I have is Uttar Pradesh, and this is a developing situation, a developing country, and they were able to take almost a white sheet of paper, which I think we all wish we could go back and kind of have a do-over. Uttar Pradesh is a state that encompasses over 220 million people, over 100,000 square miles. And they were able to go in and build buildings, buy infrastructure, trucks, cars, software, and deliver a complete Dial 100 response system. They've taken response times down from in excess of 1 hour to now around 5 minutes. And so a tremendously successful implementation in a place that needed it desperately. So for me to close, I would like to say that certainly to be a smart city, safe cities have to be better together. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And now it's Mr. Don Lopez Meneses.
Well, good afternoon, and many thanks for all of you for joining us today. Many thanks for the organizers for inviting me and for all the distinguished members of the panel. My name is Don Lopez, and I'm doctoral researcher of the Polytechnical University of Catalonia in Spain. Well, I will present some of the results of my research being carried under the direction of Mr. Professor Jordi Morato, President of the UNESCO Chair on Sustainability, with the supervising of Arabella Fraser from the Overseas Development Institute in UK. I would say that I think that we should change the way we know the reality to change the resilience. And I think we should change the resilience on culture. Culture should be understood as the whole heritage of the humanity accumulated and disposed for the societies. Culture produces technologies and organizations. I think the Smart City Expo where we are today is a very splendid example of the enormous displacement of our cultures. Once we have this notion of culture, I think we have enough to formulate the hypothesis, which is that if we change the way we know the reality, we will be more effective in induce the resilience, the adaptation, the risk prevention, or whatever in the culture. And then we will produce the transformations required, for example, in terms of technology and governance. But why to change the way of knowing? I get inspired about this because of the contrast between the typical models that we use for risk assessment, for example, that one we have in the left, and the general statement or the general definition of the risk that usually include the risk as a problem of the sustainability of the development. I would say that the model in the left, where we see the statement that says that comes from a very prominent sociologist who states that the risks are the result of destructive forces released by the processes of development being politically distributed. Well, in the left, we have a typical model, in this case, official model for landslide risk assessment in Colombia. And in this model, you will find the different factors that are measured to make a risk assessment. But you will never find in these models something like destructive forces or processes of development, or neither political distributions there. This type of factors are not modeled. So I think this model in the left corresponds to one vision of the reality, a way of knowing the reality, and the statement in the right corresponds to a different vision of the reality. So this is a discussion between philosophical paradigms. We are immersed in a modern paradigm with a vision of the reality as composed by subjects, I would say as broken in subjects and objects. And the subjects have the ability to know the reality in the objects and describe the properties of these factors. And this is the scientific epistemology. And I will say that, and that produces the models like the one we see in the previous slide. But we are being challenged. We are being challenged to change this paradigm. And I think I present in this research a vision of the reality as composed of forces and differences. And in that case, the subjects and the objects are just contingent realities. And I will say that with this line of research, there is a lot of a file of knowledge for new epistemologies and new models to understand the reality of the risks. Just to finish, this is a project that contribute me with a lot of, I would say, like empirical evidences to formulate this thesis of this research. This is a project that I had the opportunity to lead in Bogota for some years, and actually this project was recognized in the Global Conference of Risk Management as one very innovative initiative in Sendai. And we recently published with a partner a chapter of a book about this experience, analyzing it as an example of risk governance and territorial transformation produced by forces and difference being dynamized by cultural drivers. In effect, the project that we developed there in Altos de la Estancia, a lot of cultural drivers as identity, collective imaginaries, and appropriation were dynamized to produce and reshape organizational arrangements and spatial transformations. Well, just to conclude, I will say bend, not break. As it is desirable for urban systems, it is desirable as well for knowledge. And I think in this sense, this new paradigm has a lot to offer. The research in this line of knowledge on cultural devices and appropriate procedures to induce the transformation of social systems in a trend of resilience represent a very promissory file of research. Well, there is some related publications available. I suppose this material is going to be online, and some of the visual material about our experiences. And many thanks for you all for your attention. Many thanks.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Ángel Pacheco Almendros from Telefonica.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm going to make this presentation in Spanish, so if you have translation devices, please turn them on. And, my name, as I said, is Ángel Pacheco. I work in Telefonica Spain in an area called New Digital Business, trying to develop messaging solutions and emergency solutions, and that's the presentation, what's about. Okay, Telefonica is known as an operator, a global operator, but I'm trying to do it in English, so. Okay, it's a global operator, but it also provides IT services, and it's deploying emergency services from 1995. This kind of solutions, this kind of emergency solutions, are specific not only for big organizations like the 112, but also for small public administrations or even private administration, call centers, etc. And besides that, also we make Internet of Things, and also we have a smart cities platform. Right now, what we are trying to do is to bring this kind of solution we have in Telefonica towards the digital experience that we feel that our customer wants to drive and wants to go. This kind of solutions helps them in improving their services and make them more competitive. What kind of solution we have in emergency? We have a product called Seneca that provides all the different players in this area a way of attending the different calls, introducing the different information they have for different sources, and managing all the resources they have. In this solution, we have not only hardware and software, but also we have different architecture and different ways to interchange information, not only with this emergency group, but also with the citizens and all other services that can have a smart city. As you know, the smart cities trying to find different solutions in these areas, and some of these areas are very related with the emergency solutions. A smart platform for smart cities has different layers, and in each layer we can have different issues, different services or helps to improve emergency services. One, in the data acquisition layer, we will have from the smart services and IoT services a big amount of different real-time events from different sources located in different places. So with all this information, the emergencies can be managed in a better way. They have a better picture for the situation. And in the next layer, that is doing with this data some kind of processing and obtaining knowledge, we can have more precise information, more accurate information, and in a very easy and useful and low cost. The third layer, the interoperability layer, is for me one of the keys in interchanging smart cities and emergency solutions, to connect different groups, to connect the citizen, to connect the police, the people trying to drive the ambulance. I don't know if it's what it says in English. To go the sanitary people, it's important to interchange as much as possible, as accurate as possible, the information. And we have also different services on top of this kind of smart city platform that has also to be used in emergency solutions. For instance, we have in our solution that has high availability, can be deployed in different geographically split centers, etc. We have the ability of interchange information between all these groups. This gives us a very standard way of using and interchanging the information, and makes a simple translation between the different organizations and players in the incident. It uses standard definition of the data, and it's a way not only for interchanging information internally, but also with external organizations. This is a drawing of the architecture we have. And this is an example of real case of use, using this boost for interchanging information. Another part, very important part in the smart city, are the people. The people are the smartest devices to interchange information with our solutions. So for that, we have applications. We have applications that allow the citizen to call, to interchange image, to interchange the position, to improve the process, the emergency process. not only for people with the ability of talking, but also with people with some problems in hearing, or with people in another country, coming from another country. So this is also a way of receiving information from the city. And another very important element of the cities are the cars. Next year, all of the manufacturers of cars in Europe has to deploy in their cars a solution called eCall that makes a call and interchange with the emergency center information and voice when something happens about localization, sense of driving, some information about the car. Just for finishing, I can say that right now, smart cities and Internet of Things can provide very valuable solutions for adapting to emergency and incidents. As soon as new services came, we are going to introduce these services in our solutions, and Telefonica is doing this kind of things from a long time ago. So thank you for your time, and sorry for my English.
Thank you. Okay, now the presentation is delivered and the session really starts. We have questions from the audience via the app, but there is also possibilities for you to ask questions. And I think we should start with the first one. We have one question saying, what is the main strategy to add resilience to a city that was built without any risk analysis, as many Latin cities, I think. So how is that addressed? Is that the question for you? Yes?
Do I volunteer?
Yes, thank you.
Well, the main point is that you have to do a risk analysis, no? I mean, we talk about risk reduction, but the reality is that any risk reduction effort starts by knowing your risks. And it's true that in many cities, in many cities there are not analysis or studies about risks, but the other is in some others there are, but they are not used. I mean, it happened to me in some occasions, in some post-earthquake situations, which I was discussing this with some mayors, and then they pull a book and say, oh, this is the analysis we got like 10 years ago. And it was there. But the reality is that they didn't really check it, or it was one more report or analysis that was put on the shelf. And that's one of the main things. I mean, it's not only, analyzing, investigating, doing analysis, but also use it. And that's one thing that it's very important. And I must say, like that example, I have many, many examples in all different operations in different places, where you have the analysis, you have the reports, but you don't have them. It's the same with the building codes and regulations. You have them, you have the building codes and regulation, but the enforcement is the problem. And I think that that's the switch we have to do. We have to start passing from the theory to the operations, and then it's when it's going to kick. I don't know.
Is there anyone who would add to that?
So I think it really lands in many cases, especially in emerging markets, at least where we see, having a proactive approach as opposed to reactive. If you wait till the thing happens, it is just a nightmare to try to get out from under it. The benefit that some emerging places have is that they don't have so many systems, and so you don't have some of the barriers. You may not have the money, which may be the other problem, but having a blank sheet of paper to go design something out of the box certainly gives the opportunity to do it right if you can get the funding out in front of it.
Please.
Yes, I would say that I will take some of words from John Claude recently in his speech. He told us like in the city we should have developed like political rules, structures planning visions, and finance. And if we don't have any of those, we are like unstable in the city. But the main driver to construct the others is the political rules. And he says that because in that way the society makes the agreements to construct the other structures. And I will like take that to my experience in Bogota, where I was working with the government, with the local government. And in that case, we got a lot of rules, of assessments. And when we start in the government, much of the assessments were already outdated. And we figure out how to work with outdated analysis, and to question if we need again to do that kind of studies that take like 2 or 1 year, I don't know, but with the problems, facing the problems, like the urgency of the problems, and we decide to tackle the problems. And I see there is a very interesting approach, because tackling the problems, we make a lot of re-engineering, reshaping of the governance structures, and that occurs for the case of the project we work. We make a lot of, I will call it like an institutional adaptation and a community adaptation to make possible the transformation of these problems. So around problems, I think there is another approach to adjust the systems of the city.
Thank you. There's another question I think was also related to this, that says, what do you think about resilience as bridging concept between humanitarian and development sectors? Again, I think you touch upon that, but please, anyone in the audience, or sorry, in the panel, could address that one. Yes, what do you think about resilience as bridging concept between humanitarian and development sectors?
I just say that this division is like an artificial division that is very useful in some cases to develop concrete tools to face the challenges. But in fact, a society should overcome across these divisions, of course, and thinking a long term, and build the structures, or the social structures and the political structures. And I would say that from my experience, of course, that's why I say that the culture is very important, because have a common vision of the city administrators, but also of the citizens, to face the future of the city is very important. And this vision includes like a relationship with the environment of where the city is settled, of course. So what are we gonna do with the hazards we have, with the natural resources we have, with the rivers, with the land, with the landscapes where we inhabit?
Maybe you would like to.
Yeah. Well, the point is that it's very well known there is a gap between relief and development, humanitarian response and development, and it's true that it's an artificial gap, but it's reality. It's there. I mean, if you go and talk with a donor, the donor will tell you, well, if it's for emergency response, you have to talk to this unit. If it's for development, you talk with this other unit, even inside the same organization or country. And this is a mistake. I think that this is one of the main problems we have, because resilience building and disaster risk reduction should be in all the activities we have. It's as simple as that. I don't think that the humanitarian response should you have to maximize resources. We are in a period in the world where we are passing through a crisis situation, financial crisis. And any resources that you put during an emergency should build the foundation, at least, for sustainable development. I mean, that's a fact. I will say I agree that the architecture of the humanitarian response is not prepared for this systems, city systems approach. That's also another reality, as I was saying. You have different sectors, and many times these sectors don't talk to each other. and in a city you cannot do that. I remember one operation, in one operation it was, I think it was 2008 in Georgia, that was the first time that we were in a crisis situation in an urban area. And you know, I went to respond to that operation, and I remember that the big crisis from the humanitarian community was, where are the affected population? Because all the displaced population arrived to the city and they were all over the place. So the humanitarian community didn't know where to go and deliver the relief items. And they said, well, but where are the population? You know, because in this case, they went to different buildings. They were not concentrated in a camp where they could give them food, water, and all that. So I think that's one thing that is changing paradigms. First, we are responding now more and more in cities. Second, the response has to take that kind of long-term view. It has to build resilience. It has to build sustainable development. And it has to be from the very beginning. I must say, you know, I mean, I'm the chair of one of the reference groups of the Interagency Standing Committee on Humanitarian Affairs. And this reference group is called MICUA, Meeting Humanitarian Challenges in Urban Areas. And the discussions we have there were quite interesting, because most of the international community are not prepared for these kind of things, and they are open to say, hey, we need support. We are specialists on food delivery, but we are not specialists on, you know, on how to deliver that food in a situation where you don't identify where the displaced population is, and when you have to deliver this food in many different buildings in the city. And I think that that's the potential of resilience. I mean, if we take one message from here, I will say, is the systems approach, is thinking integral, is thinking global, is thinking that, you know, a city is a complex setting, and we have to be able to respond to that complex setting, because that's the future.
Thank you. Stephen, you have a timeline touched upon that we need to break the silos in cities, and maybe we need an overarching financial system for this as well. And I was thinking, could that relate to the dilemma of that we have, cities have done their risk analysis, and businesses have done their contingency plans, etc., but they are done in silos. And how do we gather that knowledge and move forward to the dilemma of going to action on this knowledge that we have?
Certainly change is always a challenge, and I think ultimately the change will be driven from the citizens. The citizens will get to the point where they demand it, right? If you ultimately have a trade-off, and again, I'll stick more in the public safety than in the humanitarian side, but in a public safety setting, at some point in your life, you're going to be willing to trade some of your freedoms for safety. And so you're going to have to make those choices, and that's going to be pushed from below. And so as the people become more concerned and more frightened, they're going to put pressure on the officials, and they're going to elect the officials and push them to really be the guys that are pushing to have these silos broken down and really demand it out of the organized legacy silos that exist.
Thank you. We have a very beautiful question here from A.B. Varma, and it is, what should be the first priority to make cities bendable? And I would like us to really spend a few minutes on that question. What should be the first priority to make cities bendable?
I think we need a PhD student to start us off.
Well, I just will say that the cities has a lot of power in the difference of his inhabitants, and the possibility to include and engage this heterogeneity of the inhabitants, and make this cultural heritage to engage in the processes of development makes actually the city very strong. So we have a challenge to make visible the differences of the city and give an space to these differential expressions, and actually not only for humans, but of course as well for the difference in the landscape. I think a city I have affronted in Colombia, and this is documented, how we have a misadaptation between, it has been studied, a misadaptation between the paradigms we have to inhabit, the planning tools and whatever, and the landscape that we inhabit. We have planning for plain cities, and we have a mountainous city, and it happens so much. So the adaptation has much to do with the difference and with the heterogeneity, and to develop capacities to affront that challenge, to face that challenge.
Anyone else add to that?
Thank you. It's not an easy question. I think that the main, the starting point, I will say, is recognizing many things. I mean, the first thing is that the world is urbanizing, that cities are becoming more and more, the main context in this world. Second, that we all have a responsibility on this. We all have a responsibility, not only the local authorities, but also the national authorities, also the population in general, private sector. We are all in this, as we say, we are all in this boat. And we should collaborate, and we should start working together on that. That's the other premise. The third one is that we have to recognize that this world, this changing world, needs more capacities and needs more innovation and needs to change some trends. The fourth one, I will say, is we have to make sure that there are some challenges, and perhaps the main one is climate change now. We have to openly discuss these issues, and we have to agree that this is happening, and we have to change the way that we are living. Otherwise, we are going to end up in a bigger crisis. So I think that how do we do it bendable? We do it by recognizing that there are risks. We do it by recognizing that the cities are going to become the main areas for people living in this world. And that we have to have a kind of active approach to it. I think that's the only way.
There is a question for Hexagon and Telefonica, going very straight to the point. Do you think emergency response is sufficient for building resilience as a long-term strategy?
Well, that's for me. Well, it's not the only key. We have to deploy a good system, resilient system, IT system that help our groups, emergency groups, in doing their job. But there are also another questions that help the cities to be able to adapt to the changes. And are the people, are the global organization, the local organization, not only the emergency that is needed, but it's not the only solution to get this challenge.
So as I talked earlier, I think that emergency response really is one of the key pillars of a smart city or a safe city, and that really then is a pillar of what becomes a smart city. And so is it critical? I think the emergency response has to be one of the go-to systems, right? If you don't trust that, then I'm not sure that you're able to build the other things, because you've got to have the trust and the security of your constituents and all of the people in your community in order to fund and to push forward the other items in it. And so I think it has to bend. I think you don't know how far it bends until you do have a crisis. And, to be able to make it unbreakable, I think, is something that we can't do, but certainly making it hardened and testing it and running different scenarios, and then going back with feedback loop and understanding what it is. And I think we see that being done more and more and sharing information across cities that have had crisis.
Yeah, and I think I could add to that as you mentioned, more and more people will be depending on the functionality of the cities. I think that raises the questions also, what is the purpose of the incident management system we have? Well, maybe it is to maintain the functionality. as I was saying in the beginning. We have a few seconds left of this session, and I will ask the floor, the audience here. Is there anyone who have a question that have not been submitted by via the app? There are questions that have been submitted but not answered. But I will also open up for the opportunity to put forward directly questions. There are some questions in Spanish that I can't understand, but maybe someone would like to raise them directly from the audience. Please, take your chance.
Don't be shy.
No, don't be shy. Well, if that's not the case, it's a difficult session to round up, but definitely we have put focus on some issues that are important for the future development for our cities and the ability to withstand the pressures and shocks. And I hope you will take that with us. And I will ask please ask the audience to give the panel an applaud, and also take the opportunity to catch these people here and continue the discussions. So thank you very much for attending.